Back to Ourselves. Chapter 1. We are one. Welcome to the New World era. Thank you for taking the time to understand what we all know, but need to remember how to see. Like many of you, I enjoy the comfort of life in the Western world, one attached to words like progress, freedom, equality, and terror. For many years, I enjoyed all this world could give me. I traveled around the world and lived in many European countries. This world we live in preaches fear of the unknown and controls us by manipulating the memories of our past to have small moments in life enjoyed in the security of our families and the tranquility of our daily routines. As I'm sitting and writing in the tranquility of Western Europe, foreign fighters scream orders of massacre into the air, and people armed with guns fight for the sake of ideas that are not their own. Those soldiers, who are our children, are poisoned by fear of a reality far from existence. They go into the world and blindly spread doctrines that separate humanity instead of connecting us. We live in a world where the words used to inspire us as individuals and gather us as communities have become the tools of terror and fear, holding us captive in our own existence. They're used not by far-off organizations we've never seen, but by our own governments and superiors. But those willing to listen hear the truth behind those words. And the truth is, something is terribly wrong in our society. Cruelty, injustice, intolerance, and oppression are just a tiny part of the society we so proudly call the Western culture. Where we once had the freedom to object, think, and express objections to ideas, we now have blind consensus and a surveillance system to challenge our comfort and solicit our submission. Asking how this happened is a good foundational question to understand where we come from, but it's the wrong question if we're searching for someone to blame for this societal change. In this case, how this happened becomes a substitute for who let this happen, and the answer is an uncomfortable truth: ourselves. There are certainly those more responsible for this change than others, but if you're looking for the guilty one to blame, you need only look in the mirror, both as an individual and a society. I know why I accepted this order silently. I was blind and ignorant, surrounded by a system that abuses its knowledge not to promote the common good, but to maintain the system's power, while ignoring the needs of the planet and all living things. A system carefully constructed on fear and false reality that conspires to corrupt our reason and rob us of common sense. Fear is a disease. It brings out the worst in us. Our education systems are generations old and teach us to view our past as a dark period filled with poverty, mistakes, and dangers instead of celebrating the beauty of our evolution and the lessons we've learned along the way. In such an educational system, it's hard for an individual to understand who they are, which makes it harder to understand their role in society. There is a big difference between knowing where we came from, which is basic knowledge to all humans, and knowing why things turned out the way they did. Education that teaches the young to be terrified, full of guilt and hate, contributes to their separation from their peers around the world and doesn't promote progress or a society that sustains individuals. Misconceptions about our society stem from the lack of communication between individuals, something we've struggled with since the dawn of civilization. The world is changing. Improvements to our communication technology in the last decade allow individuals worldwide to communicate in a matter of seconds with minimal effort. This technological evolution and integration into the mass market is a significant step towards positive globalization. However, in the wrong hands, it can easily become a tool used for controlling the masses and promoting fear and separation. The general feeling of the individual that something in his reality is deeply wrong is a step toward the realization that we must find a better solution for our modern societal problems. As the educational system has taught us mainly what is right and not why it's right, our society can no longer articulate the problem and its cause. We all know it, and we all feel it. Something is terribly wrong in the reality we are all living in. We see it in our economies, political structures, and social systems. But none of us can describe it. Hopefully, by examining reality from a new perspective, we will start to understand these problems. We will understand what went wrong and what lessons we can learn that will help us build a new system for our increasingly global society. Globalization is a natural and positive process. Any attempt to fight it is unproductive. How we decide to build it will determine the future of our children and our societies. We can and should do better. It is not as hard as it looks. It just requires motivated individuals, armed with the right tools, willing to get out of their comfort zone and do a bit more for their societies. The future is in our hands, and only we can promise a better world for our children. This is what this book is all about. It is important to note that our evolution is neither good nor bad. Evolution is a natural process that comes hand in hand with life. Making bad decisions is an inevitable and healthy part of the decision-making process. It's an integral part of the process of trial and error. The belief that we don't have choices or alternatives comes from ignorance, led by our superiors and sometimes by ourselves, for momentary peace. Let's try to be better than ourselves for a while, not because we need to, but because we can. We are living this life, and we will shape the future for our children. We're being given a chance, and it would be a shame not to take it. The power of communication. To understand the reality we are living in and build a foundation for positive social change, we must touch multiple fields and challenge core beliefs. Humanity's culture has changed rapidly over the last 300 years. As a species, we've been expanding geographically for at least 30,000 years. Based on recent studies, scientists agree that humans gained modern levels of intelligence around the same period. Trying to understand who we are by only examining 2,500 years of history will yield poor conclusions. Homo sapiens, our species, have been evolving for the last 70,000 years and have conquered the majority of the world in just the last 12,000 years. That may sound surprising, as we generally only learn about the last 3,000, 5,000 years our history in school, which gives us some narrow tools for understanding our progress and who we are. This limited education that teaches us so little about our past naturally leads us to think that our intellectual capacity is quite new and still evolving compared to the rest of the planet evolving around us. The truth is, our intellect as individual did not evolve for a very long time. It is safe to say that for at least 12,000 years, our intellectual capabilities have not increased at all. You may be feeling something strange now, and that's normal. The information presented above contradicts the fundamental beliefs you have been taught your whole life. I had the same reaction. It's easy to ignore and throw away information we feel uncomfortable with, but that doesn't make the information less relevant or true. This information is hard to accept because we've been taught that over the last 3,000 years, society's progress is the result of a few intelligent people and the evolution of our species. Indeed, humanity has developed a lot in the last 3,000 years, but as we will see, those changes didn't require a jump in the intellectual capacity of humans. So, what changed from those early stages of humanity? What tools did we acquire that helped us conquer the world? The answer is quite simple: communication. Comparing modern humans to our ancient ancestors helps us understand how we evolved and how we didn't. As we result from evolution, our capabilities and shortcomings are attached to the world around us. This unique combination has made us who we are today. By looking at what we've become over the millennia, we can try to understand what traits we don't need and what we have gained. Modern humans are unlikely to survive isolated in a jungle compared to our 3,000-year-old ancestors. It is an important point, as it can teach us many things. First, during the evolutionary process, we lost most of our physical capacities as animals surviving in nature. Our physical evolution occurred parallel to the evolution of technology and our capacity to affect and control our surroundings. Today, much of Western society lives in cities far removed from our natural habitat, and this evolution has caused us to lose many basic survival instincts from the previous millennia. For example, more people require glasses, and most of the Western world suffers from some back issues. Our ability to map out our surroundings and survive without a nearby supermarket is low. Looking at it straightforward, it can be said that humans are losing their capacity to live and survive in their natural habitat, nature. Most tools we use daily, wheels, forks, chairs, tables, clothes, umbrellas, and others, were invented hundreds or thousands of years ago. They haven't changed much since then. It's not that we are not evolving, but that the evolution of humans isn't contingent on bigger brains, more intellect, or more physical strength, as we like to believe. We did evolve fast and everywhere, and the simplest explanation for our global conquest is to look at our social and mental development over the last 30,000 years. During this period, humans have constantly worked on developing a new tool we didn't have before, the tool of communication, both verbal and written. Communication is our strongest tool, which brought us from being part of nature to surpassing it. Thanks to our evolved communication, humans have conquered and settled worldwide, allowing us to build new, strong cultures. One of the easiest ways to see this evolution is by observing the characteristics of our leaders. Over the last 3,000 years, humanity's greatest leaders have become the best communicators in their respective societies, not the strongest or fastest. As those traits become less relevant to one's survival, let's examine this more deeply. Before the communication revolution, humans lived in small packs, like many other animals. Their communication capacity was limited, and they lived mainly in the moment, merely reacting to the world around them. The religions of that period were based on the fundamental idea that humans are part of nature and not its controller. Historians have concluded that in this pre-communication period, the capacity for Homo sapiens to group up and plan ahead was limited. This prevented our species from planning or organizing large-scale movements and societies, which made us weak compared to the physical size, speed, and force of potential predators like lions, tigers, mammoths, and wolves. Humans evolved to be social animals, a trait observed in many groups of mammals that are too weak individually. This social need evolved to provide security and comfort, as Homo sapiens were at a significant disadvantage compared to potential predators. Due to that, it's not surprising that the tool evolved by humans to overcome predators and dominate the planet came from something other than physical speed or size. Our communication capacity allows us to share ideas, evolve them as a group, and maintain them as a society. Since then, our capacity for communication has continued to develop, allowing humans as a species to create more prominent communities and larger concepts and acquire a deeper understanding of the world we live in. The communication revolution has affected many aspects of human life. It gave us tools that forever changed the world. It gave us the capacity to pass information from generation to generation, allowing ideas and concepts to evolve over time. This lets us save a lot of energy and research as we inherit the knowledge of our elders regarding what's dangerous and needed, the best way to avoid and/or solve problems, and how to work together to arrive at solutions. The capacity to share a set of beliefs with a group. This allows us to create both trust and communities, as the more beliefs people have in common, the more comfortable and safer they feel around each other. This helped humans fight for common goals, but it also enabled us to justify the massacre of humans who lacked our shared beliefs. This result is, without any doubt, one of the strongest forces driving humanity. We see it not only in our day-to-day lives, but in wars and separations based on religion, nationalism, and political parties. The capacity to share information and brainstorm as a group. Information sharing and brainstorming were confined to local groups, but developing writing and language systems shared among humans helped spread ideas across more significant geographic regions. In many cases, brainstorming is used as an accelerator of creativity. The writing of this book is a beautiful example of it. Understanding that our capacity to evolve from a clan to a village, from a village to a city, and from a city to a country is possible thanks to and only due to our ability to communicate, understand abstract concepts, and pass information is extremely important as it is a fundamental concept repeated all over this book. Communication developed over time thanks to and with our ability to think and understand in terms separate from the real world. Abstract thinking allowed humans to create plans, wage better wars, create abstract religions, separate people, and unite them under certain ideals, develop new surveillance techniques, and make humans the best inventors of tools, stories, and dreams. Put simply, humans couldn't create large-scale societies or philosophies without the ability to imagine and communicate. Detached from its usage, any tool or capacity is no more than an unused potential. Our minds and actions transform it to become what it is. In our modern time, people in the West is mainly occupied by obstructive thoughts, concepts, and hopes, as we live in a society in which we work for money we don't see, talk with people we cannot touch, and believe in the ideals that are located only in our mind. Understanding that our capacity for abstract thought and communication is neither inherently good nor bad is essential. It is just that, a capacity. It's simultaneously the solution for our problems and the cause of our misery, a tool used for both good and bad. Another important point we must agree upon at this stage is that for at least 500 years, the most significant danger to humans has come from other humans. We're no longer threatened by other animals. Our species has long forgotten those days. Deadly plagues are controlled, and starvation exists only due to the lack of positive communication and not a lack of resources. For hundreds of years, the leading cause for early death has been ourselves. By itself, it's something we're all aware of. Nevertheless, it takes us longer to acknowledge this when we really consider it. For the sake of making this point even more robust, it can be agreed that in the last 2,000 years, the leading cause of mass murder has been in the name of religion, racism, or plain ignorance. The reality is that if we stop being afraid of each other and killing each other, our ability to create, expand upon, and improve our lives will increase exponentially. The human mind is a fascinating thing. It can't know what it's never heard of, but it absorbs any new information available. As a lion born in a cage can't imagine the feeling of running in nature, a person born in Europe and educated locally cannot imagine alternatives to his education until he meets someone with a different experience. This is a very important point, as we tend to see ignorance and stupidity as negatives, instead of a basic condition of all humans. Ignorance and stupidity have always been explained by one person with more knowledge than another. It's strange, as we all start our life fragile and ignorant, without any knowledge of our surroundings. As information can only be obtained from communication and experience, the idea that ignorance or lack of understanding is a negative trait is wrong and denies one's own original experience. In most cases, people who treat others as ignorant or see it as a negative thing reflect their own fear and ignorance. As we all start ignorant of our own existence, judging the incapability of another without helping them will represent, in most cases, the ignorance of the first person and not the incapability of the other. On the other hand, it's true to say that an ignorant society is easier to control and manipulate. The only reason to keep information from society is to control the population, and there is nothing productive in depriving a society of tools for growth, if not for the sake of keeping it weak. This knowledge is not new and have been well understood by the ruling elite for thousands of years. As communication channels evolve through the development of the internet and our ability to see the world as it truly is, a new reality has emerged. It's a reality in which we do not need to lean on our leaders' decisions to supply us with information as they please, but one in which we can ask questions on a global scale instantly. As we look at this information and begin to understand our society, the global population, and the problems emerging from our lifestyle, forces us to look at the true causes of humanity's problems. All concepts of war, famine, poverty, and division look less and less like a product of nature and more like the pursuit of the few after power and domination at the price of the impoverishment and misery of the many. This dictatorship of the few need to end, as we are all human, sharing the same planet, in which there is enough food and space for everybody, without the need to enslave people and animals and destroy the earth. Control and social acceptance. Language simultaneously evolves with our capacity for communication. Words are used for all our communicative purposes. We use them to understand the world, the people surrounding us, and ourselves. During our conversation about the evolution of our language, it's important to remember that because we talk to ourselves in our own heads, using words before speaking to others, our communication development was first with ourselves and then with our groups. Let's start with the definition of what we call a word. In linguistics, a word is the smallest element that can be uttered in isolation with objective or practical meaning. This contrasts deeply with a morpheme, the smallest unit of meaning that will not necessarily stand on its own. A word may consist of a single morpheme, for example, rock, red, quick, run, expect, or several, rocks, redness, quickly, running, unexpected, whereas a morpheme may not be able to stand on its own as a word. In the words just mentioned, these are s, ness, lie, ing, ed, respectively. A complex word typically includes a root and one or more affixes, rock-s, redness, quick lie, running, unexpected, or more than one root in a compound, blackboard, sandbox. Words can be put together to build larger elements of language, such as phrases, a red rock, put up with, clauses, I threw a rock, and sentences, he threw a rock too, but he missed. The term word may refer to a spoken word, a written word, or sometimes to the abstract concept behind either. Spoken words comprise units of sound called phonemes and written words of symbols called graphemes, such as the letters of the English alphabet. During our conversation about evolution of words and their direct implication on our daily lives, it's important to remember the following concept. Words have been created to describe the reality around us, implying that the reality around us does not require our words or understanding for their continued existence. Things that require words to exist should be categorized as human concepts. As such, it's humans that sustain its existence and not reality itself. At first, words were developed to signal upcoming dangers to one another more efficiently and accurately. For example, the call for a predator arriving from the sky or from the ground is also found in monkeys and other evolved animals. The capacity to signal locations by voice, movement, or smell is seen in many animals, such as bees, dolphins, wolves, etc. It's possible that at its first stage of evolution, words served humans as survival tools. As humans evolved, our ability to communicate in words evolved to signal the dangers of the period. The words for colors helped us teach others which fruits were dangerous. Words to describe past events helped teach lessons between generations, and maybe most importantly, gossiping helped humans learn who they could trust. Without any doubt, the development of new words made the life of the humans of the early period safer and easier. The new capacity to communicate allows humans to cooperate with bigger groups, better understand their surroundings, and create collective knowledge. With the development of the usage of words, we also gained the ability to think abstractly. The capacity to think about the future, plan ahead, and create new things are all based on our capacity to think abstractly and use word to frame it. Moreover, abstract thinking is handy when shared with others, as it allows us to use stories that helps us understand the nature around and our own group. Words and abstract thinking allows humans to acquire better tactics for defense and variations attacks, giving to humans the capacity to overtake bigger predators and manipulate nature. For example, early humans could describe new animals, threats, and situations to their friends with these new abilities. As long as the human used terms familiar to others in their group, they could recreate the experience in their imaginations, thus allowing faster and better communication between them. For a very short period after the creation of words and abstract thinking, humans began developing quickly. As the danger of predators diminished, our ability to hunt big animals increased, and efficient ways to build and maintain developed. The way to the top of the food chain became clear and achievable. This evolutionary step positively impacted our early human ancestors 30,000 years ago. From that moment, it took humans less than 20,000 years to conquer the world and enter into the agricultural age. As human expanded into tribes and cities, so their need for most sophisticated security increased. Language played a big role in this process. Security has been achieved mainly by controlling nature and the human surrounding. Language played an important role in this process. Detached from the real threats of mature, the development of abstract thinking brought with it the capacity to speculate into the unknown, creating anxiety and paranoia. The ability to imagine possible scenarios in our heads helped humans better prepare for actual threats in daily life, but also brought a host of new concerns and ways to spend free time. Our capacity to expect or hope not only brought a new source of energy to groups and individuals, but also brought with it the capacity to be anxious, disappointed, and to hold regrets. Our modern minds are not so different from the ones who lived 12,000 years ago when it comes to human basic needs and motivation. Security has always been a top priority. The need for control, which gave us the motivation to conquer the world, has increased regardless of the actual threat in our surroundings. To put it simply, human fought for control and security for millennia, facing nature and predators. Evolutionarily, we became obsessed with it, making it part of our inner mechanism. With the development and advancement of humans, both the dangers of nature and predators has been controlled. Regardless, our inclination toward risk calculation didn't change. After conquering our surrounding, we passed to controlling ourselves, creating rules, enforcement bodies, and boundaries, all under the same need for control and protection. Feeling in control creates in humans a feeling of trust. Trust has to do with prediction. At its core, trusting a person means that he is predictable. Language plays an important role in our capacity to create trust with other humans. It allows for the creation of social structure based on communication and the creation of expectations. This phenomenon is easy to notice on a social scale. Humans' main concern today is related to social acceptance, fear of lack of control, and the fear of not meeting one's personal expectations. All derivatives of our need for security and control, deriving from our capacity to communicate and speculate. Our need for social acceptance is not only based on our need to be part of something bigger, but also our fear of being alone, which makes our ability to predict and control our lives harder. Social trust and grouping are a complex game of trust, initiated by its individuals. It requires abstract thinking and a predictive capacity to allow the group to form from the first place. From the moment a person wants to join a group, the group will demand from the individual to self-identify. The first test an individual must pass is to explain to the group who he is and what are his intentions. Such an act will not only require the individual to explain himself in a way he's never done before, but those ideas immediately become a commitment toward the group. In the end, the need for the group to understand who the person is and what his intentions are is required for the purpose of predicting the individual's future activity and how it will impact the group. From the moment the group have accepted the individual, two different processes will exist in the individual's mind: the need to behave as the group demands and to maintain his own personality as described previously to the group. Expectations are one of the most abstract and realistic aspects of our lives, as they start in the mind and affect reality. The expectation trap is one of the leading causes of the misery of humans these days, as it affects us on many levels. This trap is built from three distinct aspects included in our mental structure: self-expectation, expectation from our surroundings, the awareness of the surrounding expectations from us. It's important to mention that most of these problems wouldn't exist without the use of words. Self-expectation starts in our head, meaning it doesn't reflect the actual reality of our world. We can notice that if reality lined up with our thoughts, expectations wouldn't exist in the first place, as the thought that we all die in the end is not a matter of expectation, but reality. The concept of expectation starts from the hope and belief in our heads related to a possible future. These thoughts can only exist by thinking of them with words. The moment in which a thought becomes a problem is when it does not fit the action of reality. At this moment, an individual will be disappointed, which can bring feelings of impotence, stress, confusion, or depression. The professional term in psychology for such a case is cognitive dissonance. These negative feelings are understandable as the individual realizes how minimal control he has over himself and life. The amusing thing about it is that the definition of the cause of this misery has been made by the person himself in the first place. To better understand the concept, let's look at an example. If I believe I'm a good person and the world is good to good people, when doing an act I consider to be bad, as dissonance will emerge in my ears, as I believe good people do not do bad things. On the other side, if bad things happen to me, a feeling the world is a bad place, or the possibility that maybe I should be better, can arise. This situation will, without any doubt, be troublesome and inflict other aspects of one's reality, as when a person loses confidence in himself, it affects his personality and daily life. Leaders need to keep individuals under their control requires an ability to predict their future actions and thoughts. It is the prediction capability that allows a leader to rule, as it allows manipulation of populations. In many people's minds, the incapability to explain a phenomenon in words implies that either the phenomenon doesn't currently exist or that it was impossible to begin with. Their belief that the lack of explanation means something doesn't exist is, at best, misleading them and secures the importance of the individual in front of both the individual and society. In reality, many concepts in the individual's life don't require an explanation, as they are what they are, even if it is clear that no explanations are required to express an individual's satisfaction when eating a good chocolate. In many other cases, the incapability of an individual to find words to explain some phenomena could create doubt in the phenomena itself. For example, a random person can live happily all his life without asking himself why, as it's a constant part of his reality. The day a second person asks the individual why is he happy, what's causing it, and if they're sure he is sure about, the individual will begin to doubt himself, as he never had to articulate it in words. While the first question requires a simple yes answer, the second question will force him, for the first time in his life, to answer in his own words about why he's happy. Because it never occurred to the individual that words are required to explain something he already knows. Now, suppose our friend doesn't manage to give satisfactory answers to the questions. In such case, the individual itself might conclude that without a good explanation to describe his happiness, it is possible that his happiness is not as he thought from the first place. That's absurd, as he felt happiness until just minutes ago. Let's take it another step and assume that after a short period of reflection, our still happy friend come with a verbal explanation for his happiness. After listing the second person, declares that it doesn't sound to him like happiness. Moreover, imagine the second person continues his explanation by explaining that he's been around and that real happiness is entirely something else. He'll tell our friend that the process to achieve happiness is long and demanding, but that the end result is rewarding. To finish his argument, he will describe happiness in specific terms and will follow with the final question: are you sure you're happy? No doubt, our previously happy friend will be in a complex position, probably less happy than before this encounter. This is just one example of how words can manipulate reality and control someone's set of beliefs. It's important to mention that different people have strong beliefs about specific things in their lives and some less intense feelings about other things. It's easy to manipulate one set of beliefs by asking someone to explain them. The field of sales is professionalized in using such tools to create profit. Overusing such a tool can, in many cases, cause individuals to live a life of confusion and vulnerability. To fully understand the solution available to our society and individuals for changing the reality we live in today and building a better future, it's essential to recognize where we come from and how we arrived at our current position. As mentioned above, words create ideas, and ideas explain our lives and can be used to manipulate individual minds. Words, language, and communication are both our greatest power and our biggest enemy. The way they're used, not their mere existence, is what makes words, language, and communication so powerful. Language and communication tools were developed to help humans understand and better control their surroundings. Today, language is used to control us, separate us, and make us doubt our abilities. By understanding how we got to our current state, we can start to understand the remedy. Solutions for these problems exist and are free for everyone. And the most impressive thing about it? The solution is the exact same set of tools used against us today. Due to the fast changes in both society and communication technology in the last 150 years, humans haven't had time to reflect on or react to the drastic changes. We live in a reality in which the values of unity and human life are preached but not practiced, a reality in which we must be right because we fear being wrong, and a reality in which we are willing to ignore the paradoxes that affect us all. We ignore human suffering, lost time, and real emotional connections to avoid losing things we never really owned. How we arrived at this point isn't a mistake or a riddle, but a long process that can be understood if someone holds the right tools for the task. Many psychological studies done in the field of cognitive psychology show that for learning, time, reflection, and repetition are key for individuals to develop a true understanding. The ability of humans to think about and reflect on new ideas is the greatest tool developed during our evolution as a species. Abstract thought pushed previous generations to build the world we know today. Reflection is a necessity for intellect. It is a tool based on our capacity to speak to ourselves and evaluate our past actions based on a personal standard. It is fundamental for human flourishing. Without it, we are not much better than any other animal. Reflection requires two foundations: a clear understanding of the past and free time to contemplate. The lack of such tools has two possible outcomes: wrong or no conclusions at all. In the current life of the individuals in West, the constant change and bombardment by the media don't give individuals time to reflect and learn. Most of the population report they feels like they don't have time for anything, resulting in less time dedicated to reflection and sleep. This kind of lifestyle is dangerous as it's taking away a main human tool of survival and evolution. When individuals can't reflect on their existence, they lack self-understanding, which is critical for self-image and helps individuals understand their role in society. Before finishing our conversation about language, I find it relevant to add that while it is humanity's strongest weapon, it has some second-order consequences affecting the human psyche. Once language has been adopted as the only tool of communication, the capacity of humans to use other tools diminishes. An example for it is the decline in our capacity to use intuition or feel our surrounding. I will speculate that lose of empathy is related to this subject, as empathy is a wordless manner of communication. Thinking in words reflects a single narrow dimension of the human existence. Words have limitations. For example, many words are based on comparison. It's impossible to explain what something is without being aware of its opposite or alternative. For example, in many cases, I can only be a good, beautiful, strong, or successful person if I understand and compare myself to something different. From the other hand, lack of word for a phenomenon can prevent a person from handling with it, or in some cases, ignore it completely. Children understand very quickly that they don't have the verbal capacity to answer questions or meet expectations made by their society. Once children understand this lack, they will search for ideas and words that describe their surroundings. This is a process of trial and error, and children need time to process what works and what doesn't. This self-evaluation becomes impossible if children don't have time and clear examples to lean on. If not developed correctly, children grow with a deficit, preventing them to develop in a healthy manner. Without understanding their capabilities, young people become vulnerable and easily accept standards dictated by outside society. When someone can't understand himself, he certainly can't understand the society he lives in. In a society where most individuals don't understand themselves, it's easy for other entities to force philosophies on them, as it gives the individual a sense of understanding and place in society. In general, the less the philosophy will require from the individual while presenting a clear self-identity, the easier it will be for them to accept it themselves. The role of education. The fundamental concept of an individual doubting their surroundings is natural and healthy. It is part of an inner mechanism that helped us survive. Historically, it is the doubter that survived the unforeseen, while the optimist in most cases died. Doubt and constant re-evaluating one's surrounding is important up to a certain point. This balance is what separates healthy and functioning individuals and the others. Education plays an important part in the process of understanding this balance. It builds in us a mental structure that helps us navigate life. For many years, the governing elite have controlled, or at least monitored, the local educational systems, as the welfare state grow as their control over education. For many, the fact that local elite have the need to control education for their survival is not obvious. Regardless, a fundamental part of the existence and survival of the elite is directly related to the educational structure in local market. After all, elite group can only survive if they're accepted by the younger generations. While it is true in many respects, and especially in totalitarian structures, government is first and foremost a management mechanism needed in all healthy societies. It's an essential part of progress, promoting security and unity. Nevertheless, not all governments benefit their people. For democratic societies to survive, government should serve their people, never vice versa. While many measurements exist to evaluate this principle, one of the most efficient ways to understand the reach of government and their push for general indoctrination can be done by observing the structure of the local educational system and its relationship to the ruling party. Education is the process of learning new information and creating habits. Various educational methods has been developed over time, such as storytelling, discussion, lectures, training, and directed research. Until a few hundred years, our elders were in charge of teaching us about our environment, saving individuals time and safety. Education existed long before our modern education system, and the idea of a general educational system controlled by the government is relatively new, unrelated to the individual's need for education. Because we constantly strive to learn more about our surroundings, education from an external system is naturally accepted as part of the learning process of all humans. Over time, our peers take a more significant part in our education, as socialization is essential to our kind. We're all searching for a community to be part of, and it's easy to understand how the behavior of the group we want to join can override all previous education. The educational system of the youngest generation impact everyone's future. At a young age, the ability of an individuals to create their self-image and understand their surroundings is heavily affected by their parents. After the first few years of life, the development of the individual becomes heavily influenced by society, including the individual's peers and the philosophy of their teachers and idols. Fundamentally, an individual's perspective of the world and themselves is mainly built based on the perspective developed early in life. Lessons and habits obtained at an early age create the foundation for accepting additional information. It explains why changing a new habit or perspective is easier than an old one. The early education of our children is crucial as it builds the foundations for future lessons. Education in young children is crucial and affects their development and worldview. It is the foundation from which they grow and develop into adulthood. To better understand where we are currently standing, we can start by observing the current educational system in Western culture. Addressing the current educational system will require we establish first a few fundamental ideas that will help us understand better the topic at hand. First, the willingness and capacity of an individual for any method of education is based on her personality. The individual's personality is based on his own perspective of himself and the world around him. Because perspectives are based on the individual's memories, a person can only be what they remember or have learned consciously or unconsciously. As the creation of memories and their monitoring is the foundation of the creation of our own image and our education, education itself is a process of building new layers of pre-existing foundation and understanding. In other words, memories and education grow like plants. They evolve based on their surroundings, starting at the roots. It is not a detached process. The deeper the layers, the more impact it will have on the creation of any new set of beliefs and behaviors. Now, we must ask two questions regarding the idea of education. What are we trying to teach or learn? What are measurements we have helping us understand if the process is successful? Those questions must be clearly established at the beginning of any educational process and consistently revisited by both the teacher and the student. Education is a progressive concept. If the answers to those questions show negative or insufficient results, the process should change immediately. Without transparency, educational systems become unconstructive and even dangerous, as transparency is an integral part of learning information and questioning the world around us. To understand the fundamental idea of a healthy education, we must make a distinction between two kinds of education. I call the two constructive education and depressive education. Constructive education fundamentally gives an individual the tools needed to acquire information of all sorts, appreciate and doubt the source of information in hand, and develop his own conclusions while maintaining a general understanding of what he does not know. On the other hand, depressive education gives an individual the absolute and unquestionable truth rather than tools to learn and question. In other words, depressive education teaches individuals what to think, not how to think. A depressive education will lead individuals to believe there's only one reality and one truth. The fundamental philosophy guiding this system is that ideas should be forced on reality, demanding it to change based on our worldview. Such a philosophy teaches younger generations how things should be and not how things are. In such a thinking, independently is not accepted. It is a system that demands compliance and blind belief, as it is mainly dictating reality and not inspiring for curiosity. An extended period of depressive education will inevitably make society view different opinions and qualities as negative, while believing that only the majority opinion is right and acceptable. This promotes fear of the other and leads to separation between people and their neighbors, peers, and society as a whole. Based on this definition, we can easily observe that today's modern system is mainly depressive. Modern education preaches fear of strange and/or different opinions. It promotes materialism, self-concentration, and reinforces existing beliefs. It also ignores the growing paradoxes shown by day-to-day reality. The modern educational system dictates truths instead of teaching students to question meanings and concepts. It demands blind obedience from students for the reward of social acceptance. The idea that a person should accept things that don't make sense to him in the first place is a direct consequence of this tyrannical education that we've long accepted as part of Western life. Following years of depressive education, the young generation in the West holds onto a philosophy of fear and terror, a concern trend that put in doubt humanity's ability to create a better future. The depressive educational system of the modern world doesn't supply individuals with the tools they need to manage themselves and their surroundings while understanding other cultures and ideas. Variations are required for the maintenance of growth and creativity of any society. The fear held by Western youngsters regarding different religions and cultures is not only demonstrating ignorance regarding this fundamental topic, but hold back the natural evolution of the West, capacity to growth. Educational systems' core mission is to help individuals acquire the tools needed to build a clear self-image and a general understanding of their surroundings. The evolution of an individual from childhood to adulthood can be determined by achieving self-control and understanding the individual's ability to change the reality around them. If not done correctly, our children become vulnerable, allowing any ideas forced on them to be accepted without objection. Weak people creates weak societies, promoting tyrannical takeover. Self-control is needed for collaboration and survival. It is what separates a child from an adult. Without its society, trust and collaboration are impossible. There's another way to explain this concept. For any material, body or soul, that exists in nature is inseparable from its surroundings. To be myself, my boundaries finish at a certain point in space where another entity starts. Suppose an entity is strong enough to stand still in an encounter with an exterior entity. In that case, the exterior entity will finish by finding an alternative passage in the moment of encounter. If the first entity doesn't have the power to stand still, it will be bent or broken by the external entity at the moment of impact. A simpler example of this concept is seen when wind or water encounters any object. The wind or water will change its direction if it cannot pass, but it will sweep away anything not strong enough to withstand its power. The same principle is applied to our personality. The personality of an individual isn't very different. When one personality encounters another or a society and doesn't have the power to stand by its own opinion, it will bend and allow the stronger personality to dictate a new perspective. Following such logic, a depressive education, which creates weak personalities, educates the masses to obey and be vulnerable to the tendencies and needs of the system instead of building a strong self-personality that will benefit the individual and the positive evolution of the system itself. Individuals can find peace only when they achieve self-control rather than trying to control their surroundings fully and constantly. By controlling themselves, individuals establish stability and power in their own lives. Self-control is necessary not because individuals lack the ability to stop themselves, but because, with self-control, they have the freedom to choose or not to choose something. Having control and confidence in oneself inevitably brings peace. Another trap created by a depressive education is forcing the mind to concentrate on secondary things while ignoring the primary issues. Education concentrated on details ignores the understanding of big-picture ideas. The Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule, the law of the vital few, and the principle of factor sparsity, states that, for many events, roughly 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. Furthermore, it has been found that in many cases, 80% of the work done will take 20% of the time, while the extra 20% of the work will take 80% of the time. This division assumes perfection, which equal to an imaginary 100% that do not exist from the first place. At this point, it's important to note an interesting illusion created by Western education that is probably one of the main causes of individual misery. The idea of perfection is imaginary and impractical, as life does not require perfection. Moreover, the 80-20 rule shows why concentrating on perfection is impractical and unproductive outside of the classroom or art domains. The idea of perfection isn't required in our day-to-day lives, and striving for perfection sucks, in many cases, all the free time we could have for the growth of other projects or ideas. Moreover, as long as details exist, the importance of the details themselves is often irrelevant or a privilege for people with a lot of free time. For example, as long as an individual spoils his/her partner, it's not relevant how they spoil them, as long as some variation of spoiling exists. It's true in the case of manufacturing lines, practical construction, and massive organizations. As long as the general vision and the process are clear, the individuals in the system and the execution of the process are, in many cases, irrelevant as long as they exist. We can call it the law of the big picture. The law of the big picture is fundamental in any society. It is what allows societies to grow and metropolitans to exist. In all aspects of society, individuals create groups. It's obvious that each individual will have their own needs and points of view, which is necessary for preserving individuality. On the other hand, as a community or society, fulfilling promises, monitoring security, and making laws regarding specific individuals' needs are not practical, as it will take too much time and resources. Eventually, as long as people continue taking care of their needs under the boundaries of the general framework, the government or the system itself won't need to occupy itself with those details. This philosophy may be hard to grasp in Western society, where the new generation is educated in a narrow, self-centered view, demanding society to change by it. This leads to individuals not understanding their part in the bigger picture, and they can't coexist with pluralism and social progress. One of the other negative effects of missing that today, most individuals in Western society are preoccupied with consuming variations of the same products and lack free time. The unimportance of detail is extremely important for the sake of liberation from the tyranny of the mind. The longer an individual concentrates on the importance of details, the harder it is for them to accept the ideas related to the unimportance of details. Words always have a tone, but a tone doesn't always require words. Words and products will pass and be forgotten, but the essence of their usage will stay for eternity. Every product reflects a specific idea, and specific ideas can be reflected in many products. Tone and ideas develop with time, while time kills words, products, and even human beings. Depressive education teaches individuals to concentrate on the details while creating a reality in which a lack of control and understanding exist in its student mind. Conversely, constructive education gives individuals the tools needed to ignore the details as long as they exist and concentrate on the general movement or the ideas behind it. The more materialism grows, the farther we'll move away from our love, peace, and respect for ourselves and our surroundings. The more we're educated by a depressive system, the harder it will be for individuals to think for themselves. Humans who don't possess the tools needed to understand themselves and accept their society will find it hard to feel their own existence, as they're taught that, without the ability to attach words or materials to an entity, that entity does not exist. Our reality is twisted and unconstructive. We can see it all around the world. Budgets for public education are low at best and survive solely based on teachers' willingness to dedicate their lives to creating a better educational system. This willingness is a sacrifice as it comes at the price of low wages. even poverty, while bankers and bureaucrats live lavish lifestyles, pursuing their own self-interests and personal profit. Researchers worldwide have shown that the status and respect for educators have dropped in the eyes of parents and students in the last 30 years. Additionally, the educational plans and materials chosen for public schools are influenced not by the values of progress and prosperity of the community itself, but by the belief in building individuals that will fit the needs of the government in the future. As we acquired the ability to share knowledge globally and unite humanity, education that doesn't promote the good of the people and nature itself is ignorant and cannot be supported. We need an educational system that creates a foundation for peace, prosperity, and productivity. The period of separation was a matter of ignorance and can no longer exist as we have transformed into a technological society. Alternative forms of education are varied and positive. By itself, a constructive education isn't a specific way of teaching, but a thought process that dictates our children's future and the world. Education is the essence of knowledge, which is the foundation of progress and unity. It's not a matter of what is right or wrong from a personal perspective, but what is constructive or destructive for society. The foundation of the new educational system should be a system of tolerance for what we do not understand based on peacefulness and awareness. We owe it to our children and ourselves to leave the world a better place than how we found it. Movements start based on understanding between individuals, creating groups and nations. Equality and freedom. The concepts of equality and freedom are in the individual's thoughts more than ever in Western society. Using those terms without knowing their history is dangerous and deceiving. The combination of the terms freedom and equality, as referred to today, is both new and contradictory. For many years, freedom has been a tool used by the government to terrorize its citizens and engage in wars against other countries and minority groups. Many examples exist of this trend. The majority of wars waged by Western societies have been launched under two main explanations: to free the foreign population from a local injustice or to protect the nation against a potential threat on the freedom of its citizens. The Nazis saw Jews as a threat, and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were launched under both explanations mentioned above. The Christian Crusades, the current war in the Middle East, and the Cold War are but a few examples of the history of Western wars under the banner of freedom and equality. A war launched based on the philosophy of preserving the equality and freedom of a certain nation is a paradox. To understand how terms that occupied generations of intellectuals became tools of control, we should start by separating the two concepts and examining their evolution as separate entities. Equality. Before discussing these topics, it's essential that we agree on a few guidelines. If we are all good at different things, as one is better than the other in music or mathematics and vice versa, then it's fair to say we are not equal in our physical and mental capacities. Humans have been gifted with various activities in which individuals achieve different results. The idea that we're all born as humans is a simplistic way to group us for the purpose of unification. Unification is positive, but it does not make us equal. We can say that all mammals are born the same way, but does this make us equal to a cow or a dog? In reality, individuals are born with different capacities that make them a unique person. In current time, we are closer than ever to reach true equality opportunities in the West, but believing that we live in an equal world or society is unrealistic. Equality, which is a broad concept, is a human creation that stems from our ability to conceptualize ideas and words. Equality cannot be found unrelated to human activities. In ancient period, the use of political equality was a term that gave a small number of people, under certain standards, the same rights to practice politics while still enslaving other part of the population. Such a use of the term equality was valid and practiced in the time of Aristotle. After the ancient Greece period, the term seems to vanish outside of Christian concepts and reappeared as a fundamental idea in England in the 13th century. The concept of equality contradicts the concentration of power. Specifically, in our days, the idea of equality of outcomes contradicts the idea of at its core, a conversation we will develop in the next chapter. So, what is equality all about? One of the ways to approach this subject is to look at equality as a variety of social, political, and economic activities available to all individuals regardless of their gender, religion, origin, or social class, called equality of opportunities. As practiced until today, equality can refer to rights in front of the law, equality of opportunities in a workplace, equal political rights, and so on. Referring to equality without specifying the type of equality or by using it as a general term is a tool of mass manipulation. Society's elite is responsible for monitoring the population's general perceptions of the world, ensuring the masses do not understand the terms used in society. If the population doesn't understand the values they're fighting for, it will weaken society as a whole. Looking at the use of the term absolute equality throughout history will allow us to notice that the term has only recently been used as a general social and economic philosophy. For example, the equality of the Frenchmen during the French Revolution doesn't refer to the equality of the French to the Germans or any other population. At the time of its founding, the equality of opportunity in the United States referred to white, land-owning American men and their political rights. It's also important to mention that in all ancient period in which the word was used, the equality of the elite existed only thanks to the enslavement of the others. This is a trend that has continued throughout history. Also, in our days, there's equality in Western civilization thanks to the enslavement of Eastern and African populations in ways of production, manufacturing, mining, and importation of goods. Only masters need slaves, never the opposite. A deeper understanding of this notion of equality will bring you, the intellectual reader, to the conclusion that equality by itself has been invented by elite groups for the sake of gaining cooperation and separation from the rest of society. Equality can be viewed in two different ways based on what it requires from its subjects. A philosophy claiming that equality doesn't require anything from the individual is problematic, as then it's just an abstract idea. If an individual possesses an abstract thing that they never need to act on, they'll only feel its absence when it's taken from them. At this point, as the individual never did anything to acquire it in the first place or never practiced it, they'll miss the tools needed to restore it if lost. Some may claim that because the person didn't do anything to acquire equality, never used it, and doesn't have the tools to get it back, then that individual never actually had equality. Following that logical path, we can conclude that philosophically abstract equality never truly exists for individuals. So, how can we use the concept of equality, or establish a system that support real and sustainable equality? Let's start by separating equality of outcome and opportunities. The first make no sense and contradict nature and human natural inclination. The second is a necessity if we are to address democracy and the idea of equality. To establish the second, actions are required. In a real system of equality, individuals will have to gain those rights by taking action. This philosophy is straightforward. Individuals who want equal political rights must contribute to society politically. If an individual would like to have equality as a citizen, they must be an active part of their community. In this sort of equality, there must be a clear separation between what's required, how to monitor the system, and the actual equal traits. In such a system, it's important to maintain equal opportunities, allowing any person to practice their rights to participate. It can be predicted that in such a system, the majority of the population will prefer not to practice part of the necessities to acquire full and complete equality, as it'll require too much time and energy. The individual's free choice not to practice their rights and obtain true equality doesn't affect the same opportunities for others. As long as the entire population can practice their duties and earn their rights, society will achieve a healthy, relative equality system. In the late 20th century, we began a conversation about equal human rights, which brought forward an idealistic set of human rights. This idealistic set, while positive and beautiful, is also deceptive. Western society determined what constitutes equal human rights, and it's so utopian that it can't be practiced or enforced in our society. If such a world was possible, decent people would surely be happy to practice it. But as long as we fail to create and protect relative equality in our societies, we should leave other populations to handle themselves. A person can't teach without learning first. A society that hasn't learned or established such a system certainly can't preach one to other nations. The pursuit of the idea of equality is positive, but it requires practicality. Pursuing abstract and unachievable concepts is unhealthy for a society and dangerous for its neighbors. As we become more aware of the world, we become more aware of its misery. It is easier to try correcting others rather than facing one's own problem. When approaching subjects that are so general and abstract, it is important to understand that time is required to create a real change. In those cases, it is not the result that matters, but the process, as it affects actual lives and shapes societies. Words create concepts that create actions that create changes. The misconception of the concept of equality is dangerous. A wrong definition of the terms can create more misery for entire populations than improve any current state. Freedom. Freedom is another interesting subject, problematic during human history. By examining history, we can see that under different government systems, the preservation of freedom had a direct correlation with the survival of its elite, the destruction of the rest of the population, and the creation of slavery under each system. It's important to note that the concept of general freedom has never been taken or considered seriously in any political party, as the concept is paradoxical to the foundation of any society. The freedom of numerous individuals in a limited space, by its own definition, creates the lack of freedom of another, as they are two sides of the same coin. The Oxford Dictionary defines freedom as the power or right to act, speak, or think as one want. Practically, from the moment more than one individual coexists in a system, the freedom of the other will inevitably limit the freedom of the first. For example, the existence of the first in a limited space will inevitably limit the freedom of the second to move, as he is occupying a certain space. Another example is that the sound a person makes limits, in many cases, another person's freedom to speak. For more information about all of the above points, read On Politics by Alan Rain or any other historical book on the subject. It's strange to observe that this knowledge is not obvious to most of the Western population. In Western social philosophy, in which waste creation is ignored and progress is humanity's main purpose, the freedom of one group or individual requires denying the same freedom to another group person. Another paradox of freedom is that an individual will have to give away the natural state of freedom we're all born into to be accepted by society. Western readers born into this societal structure may find this idea hard to grasp. This doesn't make the point less relevant. This point is not always negative, as diminishing one freedom brings one additional security. Absolute freedom do not exist in the practical world, and most Western population let it go decades ago for the sake of security, comfortability, or both. Logically, the term freedom can be used regarding specific domains. An individual can have the freedom to walk in the streets of their town, choose their own meals, and buy whatever they want. Nevertheless, this freedom is relative, as his choices limit other in a scarce resource reality and vice versa. Real freedom is a term coined by the political philosopher and economist Philippe Van Parijs. It expands upon notions of negative freedom by incorporating not simply institutional or other constraints on a person's choice, but also the requirements of physical reality, resources, and personal capacity. According to Van Pargis, to have real freedom, an individual must 1. Not be prevented from acting on their will, that is, they must have traditional negative freedom, and 2. Possess the resources or capacities to actually carry out their will. Under this concept, a moral agent could be negatively free to take a holiday in Miami because no one is forcing them not to, condition 1 is met. But they're not really free to do so because they cannot afford the flight, condition 2 is not met. Similarly, someone could be negatively free to swim across the English Channel, but not free because they aren't good enough swimmers and would fail. Real freedom, then, is a matter of degree. One is more or less really free, not just either free or not, and no one has complete real freedom. No one is really free to teleport to Mars, for instance. To learn more about this subject, search real freedom on Wikipedia. Relative freedom should be understood and promoted. Only by truly understand this concept can we aim to reach a better political structure and a healthier society. More freedom exists today than it ever did in human history. Regardless, it seems we took recently a wrong turn chasing after a dream that cannot be obtained. The term freedom is one of the main causes of suffering and division worldwide and in local population. The idea of freedom and equality as a combined concept in Western society is a paradox, as neither of the terms makes sense by itself as a practical general term. The equality of outcomes contradicts the fundamental idea of capitalism and the hierarchical arrangement of human societies. The idea of freedom is impossible in a society that requires different social classes and enslavement for the sake of its existence, while creating waste and pollution for the sake of the pursuit of profit by the elite. It's fascinating to see that in the West, we acquire our equality and freedom as citizens by not coming into contact with law enforcement or government agents. Let's take a moment to make it clearer. If only at the moment a citizen loses his freedom or rights, he at the same very moment discovers the freedom he lost, would it be possible to say he never had it in the first place? Could we say the government just let him live with such an illusion? Does a prisoner in jail who never thought about leaving really feel like he wasn't free to leave? An extended period of ruling such a society can make individuals paranoid and passive, as the fear of losing what you have is undoubtedly a complex and disturbing situation. This misconception regarding those terms is just an example of the importance of using the right abstractive terms and the danger of using words we do not fully understand. As the majority of our decision-making and self-image start and develop in our heads, the importance of the right educational system that will give the populace the right tools to use and understand what terms to use is more important than ever. We have the power to shape our future together. A clear and achievable goal must be determined for such a process's success. A well-educated society holding the right terms and a good understanding of reality without any doubts is a good starting point.